Good evening. I'd like to call the regularly scheduled Planning Commission meeting for May 7th to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call vote, please. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Garcia,
Here.
let the record show that Commissioner Krushat has an excused absence. Commissioner Pahana?
Here.
Vice Chair Cure?
Here.
Chair Walker?
Here. Announcements. These proceedings may be viewed on demand on the City of 29 Palms website at www.29palms.org. You may also live stream this meeting by going to the city's website and clicking on the meeting's agenda link. Public comments. This is time for the public to address the Planning Commission on issues within the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission that are not on this printed agenda. All comments are to be directed to the Chair of the Commission and shall not consist of any personal attacks. Members of the public are expected to maintain a personal and courteous decorum during their comments. There is a time limitation of 3 minutes per person. If you have not already done so, please fill out a name and address slip and give that to the Planning Commission Secretary. The Planning Commission is prohibited by Brown Act, state law, from taking action or discussing at length items not included on the printed agenda. Public comments on a specific agenda item will be deferred until consideration of that agenda item. I'm going to open public comment. Do we have any just general public comments? I'm going to close public comment. Commission comments and meetings attended. We'll start with Alex.
I attended last month a meeting at the Black Cactus about a food drive, and that's the only thing I've attended since.
Leslie.
I have not attended any meetings since our last.
Jessica.
I have not attended any meetings since our last.
I have also not attended a meeting since our last meeting. The consent calendar. All items listed on the consent calendar are routine matters or formal documents covering previous Planning Commission interaction. Items items are enacted by one motion and a second without separate discussion unless a member of the commission requests dialogue on a specific item at the beginning of the meeting. Do we have any corrections, changes, or needed changes to the meeting minutes?
So, Chairman, it was brought to my attention that a comment under the general plan status report, I had mentioned that it was Commissioner Krushat that made the comment, and it was Vice Chair Cure brought to my attention that it was actually her. So I want to make that correction or note that correction.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar with the requested change to the minutes on April 16th?
I motion that we accept 1 and 2 as written with Secretary Shelley's adjustments.
Do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
I second that.
Roll call vote, please.
Thank you. Commissioner Garcia?
Aye.
Commissioner Pahana?
Aye.
Vice Chair Cure?
Aye.
Chair Walker?
Aye.
Approved.
There are no items removed from the public or from the consent calendar. Moving on to public hearings. We don't have any public hearings today. Discussion of potential action items. Do we have any? No. Do we have a community development director updates, or do you want to do that at the end? We can do that at the end if you like. Okay, we'll move that to the end. So moving on to study sessions. So just real quick, I want to get consensus for everybody. We don't have Commissioner Krushat, so I think we should move item number 4, the workshop on the planning process, to the next meeting or a meeting when all of the 5 of us are here. How does everybody else feel?
I agree.
Sounds good.
I agree with that.
All right, so we'll move the planning process workshop to a future meeting when all of us are here. So with that done, let's go to item number 3, the temporary use workshop on temporary use permits in residential areas.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, We do get approached quite often at our public counter about individuals wanting to have some sort of event on their private residence. And this does happen. Sometimes it's seasonally because now we're getting into wedding season. So people want to have weddings on their fantastic desert property. Other people want to have art shows, or they want to have some live entertainment coming in for their friends and things like that. So there's all sorts of things that are coming up in residential areas that don't fit within the development code's very particular list of items that do need a temporary use permit. For instance, the likelihood of a circus happening on a private residence is probably not very much. Parking lot sales, farmers market units, those are not typically found in residential areas. But large private events do tend to happen. So we as staff, and this is a very touchy, sensitive issue because we're talking about residential areas. We definitely don't want to regulate when someone can have a Super Bowl party or a children's birthday party or anything like that. It's large enough events that may impact a neighborhood or the neighbors surrounding an area that's having an event. This is our draft criteria. This is not an end-all be-all. This is a starting point. We're thinking anything when you have a ticketed event, if you're going to be selling alcohol, that does happen at private parties where they actually have a bar set up temporarily, or if there's a need for some sort of the closure of roads or traffic control or parking on other people or on surrounding properties besides the one where the event is held, that kind of thing. Those are our starting points. We may include others, but this is up for the commission to give us direction on as far as the amount of people that may be expected. Of course, if you have a larger property, you could accommodate more people than if you had a 6,000 square foot lot. So it gets kind of tricky and fuzzy. So when situations like this occur, I, as a community development director or a future community development director, has the authority to make administrative policy like this, and to say this is the trigger, this is what we're doing. Given A, the sensitive nature of the site, and B, that this doesn't quite fall under an interpretation, I'm asking for some guidance in the public forum from the Planning Commission. So I have two questions. One, does the criteria make sense? Do we need to add? Is it extensive enough? And secondly, whatever the direction of the commission is, should it be written into the development code, which makes it very rigid and very enforceable? And if we go down that path, we have to write the development code, come back to you, go to the city council, have it fully adopted. Or is it sufficient that we have it as a written policy that's available to the public that we can publish on the website and things like that? So we're asking for direction on these types of events. So any feedback is welcome.
Do we have any comments or questions from everyone up here?
I'll hold my questions till after public comment.
Same.
Alex, anything, or you want to wait till?
Yeah, I'm gonna wait till after.
Okay. It is a study session, so generally we don't open up for public comment, but since the consensus is people want to hear from the public if they have a comment, we're going to open for public comment real quick. Do we have any, no, this is not item number 5. Does anybody have any comments they want to?
I have a comment about the homeless people.
That we're going to wait for a little bit on until we get to
Okay, I'll wait.
that.
I'll wait.
No, please. Please come up to the microphone, and then when you get done, if you could fill out a name and address slip, that would be very helpful.
I didn't know I was gonna, okay, you just brought this up.
I'm Mary Kay Sherry, and when you're talking about this, does it mean like a meeting at somebody's house for a bunch of people? Like, for the last 30 years, the first-class miners have had meetings at different homes periodically in the community. They don't have alcohol, and they don't sell tickets, except raffle tickets.
Well, so if with the criteria that we set forth, if that meeting then meets that criteria, one of the things of that criteria, then yes, they would need to do a temporary use permit.
And there would be a
but-
fee associated with that, I assume, or no?
Say it again?
Is there a fee associated with that?
There is a fee to these things, and when we say ticketed event, that doesn't mean, that means ticket for entry.
Yeah, there's no ticket for entry is what, I understood that.
Yeah.
But
But-
if there was gonna be enough people to where we needed to do a road closure for people to
We've
park.
never
on-
had to
right.
close roads. We probably have 30 people, but it's usually out, it's probably still the one house that we've been using. It's out of the city a little bit. I mean, obviously, you, in order to accommodate 30, 40 people at your house, you can't have it like where I live. We
Right.
couldn't park anybody.
And this is the challenge that we've been dealing with. But in general, I mean, I would not consider that as a need for temporary use permit, like a book club or, you know,
Okay.
study session or things like that. Just from what we can always talk about
Right.
scenarios, but
Yeah, this isn't a it's, they have quarterly meetings at different locations, and they do it in Yucca Valley and other communities. And sometimes we do it out in the Old Dale Mining District. So, okay, just I need a clarification.
Yeah.
Ma'am, if you could fill out a name and address slip and then at the end.
Hi, Anna Stump. I just want to remind you about the Highway 62 art tours, which happens in 3 weekends every October. It's the first, second, and third weekend, and there are probably 20 to 30 private residences that participate in that. And there are, anywhere from 20 to 100 cars coming each day to those studios. It would be really burdensome for the artists to have to do a TUP because we already are paying to participate in the art tours. And I don't believe any of the other communities require that. So I just wanted to throw that out there, something that does happen, that's been happening for a long time. So.
Nobody else from the public? Okay, we're gonna close public comment. Bring it back up here.
Okay, I appreciate that. I had a email in front of me, so I thought it fair to hear from all. But if in the future you don't want to accept public comment during study sessions, I understand. TUPs are at the staff level.
that's correct.
Okay, so in these types of cases, it would just be at yours appealable to the planning commission.
That's correct.
Okay.
Again, it's a fine line, what triggers, or a very fuzzy line, depending on how you look at it.
Right, I understand. You must be getting a lot of requests, because like we do have the art shows, like she's mentioning that there's tons of events that are happening at residencies, but if it's to regulate something that's having a hard time, to put such strict rules on for you to enforce. Yeah, that's good.
I think with a ticketed event, just specifically, it's like something that you're selling a ticket for profit to come to. You have to have a like, here's my ticket in order to get into the event, versus I'm gonna RSVP for your party and I'm coming. The sale of alcohol usually has to come from someone who already has a permit to, like a catering permit, to be able to have the alcohol there to serve it in that sort of fashion, where there is a sale of alcohol and it's coming from someone who has that license. And the event host typically needs to have insurance for the event, which will cover alcohol sales and any other additional things on the property, like if there's a pool, etc. As far as closure of roads, if it's over a certain amount, if it's going to cause traffic issue within the area for backing up lights or anything, then that would need to be something that they would need to get ahead of time. What I don't see on here, there's like the parking. So that would be the additional, if we need to close a road because there's so much traffic, depending on the location, there may not be the parking requirements, and then they'd, I think, need to have outlined where they're parking, if there's some sort of shuttling into the property. Are they parking on site? Is it a sandy dirt road where everyone's going to get towed out because they're stuck in the dirt? So that's kind of my interpretation of.
So you could park on the street anywhere you want to, but you want, in particular, if somebody's coming and admitting that they're going to have this event, that you'd want to have strict rules reminding them of where the parking.
Yeah, like say I'm gonna have an event for 300 people. I'm selling 300 tickets to the event, and I only have parking. There's only the street parking that can accommodate 30 cars right there, right? Like they're gonna need to park somewhere. A lot of times people just park all over places they shouldn't be parking because if you don't already have that figured out, or if it causes issues just from the cars themselves, like congesting a road, right? Or making it so that people are backed up along a stop sign forever because there's a bunch of cars that need to get into at the same time.
So you're saying to have parking.
In that type of situation, that's like a larger scale problem.
Have you been getting like a lot of complaints from like residents in these situations?
You know, sometimes when we do have like a wedding and stuff like that, sometimes those run long and they run late and there's noise. But if they have the permit, you know, someone will complain to us. And it's like, well, they have a temporary use permit, and if they don't, then they can be cited in one way or another.
Yeah.
It's.
But the
I
temporary-
almost want to say, for lack of a better term, a temporary use permit for residential use is almost insurance against complaints, because hey, I have a permit to conduct this activity.
Until X
So it
time.
protects the person who's trying to throw the event. Yeah, right.
Like if you call in and say, I'm complaining about the noise of this event, they'll look and say, oh, they have a permit to have this event until 10 p.m. So at 10 p.m., if that's still going on, then it's an issue. But until then, they already have it permit.
But if you get a temporary use permit, doesn't mean you get to break all the rules because you
No.
went and got a
No.
permit.
Right.
So they would have to abide by quiet hour time and nuisance time. Like they would still have to abide. So it's just an extra step to go, okay, we verified they asked for permission, but if they quiet down by 10 and it's all done, it's just one extra step.
Yeah. I guess for the wedding, that's not a ticketed event, right?
That's also
So
not a ticketed
It's
event.
not.
But
that's
that
not.
gets into the issue of, if it's large enough, you may cause a traffic issue.
So we do issue conditions of approval based upon the event itself. Bringing up parking is definitely something that we put in there. So if the event is large, we try to let people know that you need to confine your parking to your property, or you have to have people shuttled in to the event. And then, Leslie, what was the other comment that you made? The last comment?
That basically they're still held to the same rules. It's just that you have the
noise.
Right.
So they still have to abide by the noise ordinance. We put that in the conditions of approval. So all of those things just depend on, what type of event it is. So we do take those things into consideration.
like I can have a live band, but I still have to be quiet by 10.
By 10 o'clock.
Right. So it's just giving the city a heads up should they get
Yes.
a call that, hey, there's a rock band at my neighbor's house. You'd be like, oh, they have a
They
TUP
have a
until 10.
TUP, right, and amplified sound will end by 10 o'clock.
But that would happen anyways if I didn't tell you.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
Correct.
So you are looking for guidance on creating this policy.
That's correct. Or the decision of the Plan Commission could just defer it to our best judgment regardless. Or you could decide that. Excuse me. The commission could decide that, it's still up to our judgment and just let us decide it on a case by case basis, or give us more definitive direction as to whether or not this is sufficient, whether or not it needs to be written in the code,
Can you go back
administrative
to the
policies
last,
enough.
can you go back to the last slide?
Yeah.
So you're already having, community development director level approval on these items.
That's correct.
So then, to your previous statement, which I think I alluded to, yes, I think this can be at a community development director level, appealable to the planning commissioner.
So
Commissioner.
are we saying this is, well, I'm not talking about the process of a TUP, I'm talking about if it's an administrative policy as to what would trigger a TUP in residential areas.
But the development code already states a temporary use permit is required for each individual, agency, organization, institution, or businesses wishing to conduct temporary activity or use in conformance with the standards of this chapter. That already accounts for residential areas.
Chairman, if I might say, I think the only thing that that is not clear in the code is at what level, how many people would a TUP trigger? So for instance, if you're just having a UFC party at your house and you're having 15 people over, I don't think a TUP is appropriate. But if you're having people over and you're selling tickets or you're selling alcohol, that obviously triggers it, no matter how many people are coming. But the code is sort of silent on the number of attendees to your party when this would trigger.
Or anything else that might trigger it.
Well, what's the square footage of this room? Supposedly I can have 110 people in here. So my house could be this size, right? Maybe you'd let me have 110 people at my house? Like, that's an interesting proposal to limit people.
Yeah, I don't think limiting people, I think it's whether or not you should require to get the TUP for that amount of people or not.
So,
Right.
so what is the suggestion?
In my suggestion, in my mind, it's if you're having I guess it's deciding what the large is, but like you're selling tickets, selling alcohol, that's a for-profit kind of event. If you're having a ticketed event or you're inviting people to RSVP through a ticket platform, that's a private event. So I feel like public facing is when you're selling things to the public to come and you don't know who the people are, you're just selling the tickets to them.
Is that like, for example, those art shows where you go to 30 residents
The art
and you
shows
park?
you go to a person's
How?
property to see their art. They're not having an event where they're selling a ticket or selling alcohol. So it has nothing, it wouldn't have any,
So your tie is if they're selling a ticket for money.
if it's selling a ticket and selling alcohol is what they're recommending on here. It's just whether or not we agree with that. I mean, I think that's fine because if you're selling tickets and selling alcohol, you're generally having a public facing event on a private property that's being rented for a public facing event. If I'm the property owner and I'm just saying, hey, I'm sending out this thing, you got to put in your contact to know that you're coming. I'm not scanning your ticket at the entry of the door saying, you know, I just want to plan for how many people I'm gathering. Or if it's a meeting, you might put your information in so you know who's coming to the meeting, so you have contacts to maybe send the webinar ahead of time or whatever it is, but you're not trying to sell a ticket for profit. So I think that's kind of the difference.
So like a Bible study where 30 girls or 30 people are going to come over to the house is fine because I'm not selling anything. That's not the problem. The problem is when we introduce, I'm selling tickets or selling alcohol.
Yeah, that's what they're recommending.
That's where we're having a starting point. We also want to make sure that, and it's also good practice to let your neighbors know if you're gonna have a large event.
We're trying to find, excuse me, like a threshold if you're not doing that. Say you're having a wedding and you invite 300 people. Does that require a temporary use permit? Or what is the threshold for the number of people?
I think maybe, in my opinion, it's not for like a wedding, maybe it has to do with actual cars. Like if you can't accommodate 300 cars at your property, then you might need to come in to get something to get approved to have parking or some sort of traffic control, but you're not selling anything, so you don't necessarily need a temporary use permit. You might just need to make sure you have enough parking, because otherwise you're in violation. If you have 300 cars everywhere, you're going to get calls about it I guess 300 people on your property also makes a difference if you're in a small property or a large one.
So like, what is the threshold?
Yeah.
Like, do you have a threshold? Like, is it 50 people? Is it 100 people? Is it 300 people?
Well, it's circumstantial based off the venue
The
space or the
size
home or the
of
residence.
place,
So
yeah.
ultimately, the violation is just going to be
Noise. And
noise, like code enforcement. They didn't get a TUP. They have a bunch of people over. There's parking. There's noise. Or we're going to say like every quarter of an acre property is limited to 30 people. Every half acre is 60. And anybody over that, that's the threshold like you're asking for.
From
And-
code enforcement, have you had that?
Yes, we've had large parties. We had one over the weekend that was permitted. It had a temporary use permit. It was a VHR. It was for a wedding. And then we recently had another one. It was an art and dancing event on Sullivan. So we do get them from time to time. We didn't get a complaint for either one of those events, though.
Do you know roughly about how many people were at both of those?
I don't know.
No.
I would say the one on Sullivan, I think that they maxed it at about 100 people, is what they said. They approximated it, and then the wedding was 50 people. But because it was I wanted to note, because it was a vacation home rental, and you guys, we'd all had this discussion that they need to get a TUP for any type of an event. So,
There's no complaints, like if someone's having a wedding on their house, we've never
Nope.
had a complaint for any threshold.
not for either one of these events that we just recently had.
In all fairness, Sullivan, like what part of Sullivan was that?
So the actual zoning over there was service commercial, but a residence was on there, and so I think it was backed by, was that B&B, and there just wasn't a lot to disturb over there.
Right. It was more of a secluded
It
area.
was a secluded area, yeah. And the wedding also was on a larger parcel, kind of in a secluded area, and they were able to confine, both events were able to confine all of their parking to their own parcel.
'Cause I think the biggest issue would be just the amount of space the area has. Because a place like
Correct.
Sullivan, there's not much on Sullivan for a good portion of it. You know, so I mean, if it were off Sunny Slope near a bunch of houses, trying to accommodate 100 people disrupts the entire community. So,
Correct. We do take that into consideration. So.
and you guys already have, like, it's pretty much at the end of the day, like, at your discretion, right? So,
But I think the question is so those uses that we're talking about aren't so much covered in the temporary use kind of uses right now, right? So we need to.
And that's a question. I mean, the commission could just say, you know, keep doing what you're doing. We don't need to modify the code or have or we're just going to defer to the community development director, or we need to have something written down so that way everyone understands the expectation that, okay, if we're going to have a 300-person wedding, you need to notify the city and get a permit for traffic control and all that kind of thing. Just
I think I would say keep doing what you're doing. If anything, you can have like a guideline so that way someone, they're going to have a large event and they come and inquire, they at least have a guideline so that they don't end up with 300 people at their house and then have code enforcement there on their wedding, because it becomes a problem. But I don't see the need to change anything.
yeah, and that's fine. This is why I want to bring it up to the commission's attention.
I absolutely want to be supportive, but I don't want to make the wrong call and cause restrictions that maybe aren't an issue. And if it is temporary, it's only going to happen for a couple hours. So I think, or a day, or like, it's just kind of like pacifying the rest of those who may be affected just for that event's over. So I'd either like more time to kind of like write a policy and think about that and what square footage would not anger the public and the communities, and like, because some people's families are large, and just having people over, am I going to all of a sudden get in trouble because I just naturally have that many more people and they could be appropriately parked on all the car, but then my neighbors are complaining even though I could park in the street. So it's just a little difficult.
It gets complicated.
Agreed. So I'm sorry if you're struggling with certain things or just facing a bunch of agony with this, but I do want to encourage you to keep going and that you can make these decisions appealable to us.
And that's perfectly fine, and this is the direction I'm looking for, actually.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I agree with that because my family's pretty huge, and if they decide to come, they take up an entire block of, and it's rare that we all get together, but when we do, we're everywhere. So, yeah, it's kind of hard to put a number on that, I suppose. And we also don't sell the alcohol.
Are there limits on numbers of times somebody could get a temporary use permit for
4 times a year.
4 times a year? Yep. So that makes it kind of, we don't want to be too strict to where you can only have 4 UFC parties at your house a year.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I definitely don't want to over-regulate it, but I'm also cognizant that large parties in residential areas could cause an issue.
So it says either put it into policy or to actually change the code.
Yeah,
So what's
so
the,
it's either, just give us direction to write a policy that we handle administratively. If you want to see it, once we've drafted it, we can come back. Or I think the consensus was not necessarily to add it to the code,
Right.
but just give us direction to write something up. And
I think that the best way forward is to continue to do it administratively, right? Write the policy. Let us review it if we want to review it, and then it's make sure that it is published so everybody can easily find it and understand when they need to do this and kind of when they don't. And
that's the direction I'm looking for.
Yeah, when they inquire, I'm having a big party, do I need to do anything? You have something to give them without. It's clear.
They think to call the city when they're going to have a big
Oh,
event.
Oh yeah,
Well,
especially
good
weddings.
on them.
that's good to know.
Especially weddings.
Well, good though. That's really good then. Sounds like you have it, and if it becomes nuisance, we have code enforcement. And then if it becomes so much that we're like, all right, here's these 7 things we continue to see, I think this would be a better policy or guideline.
Mhm.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
okay, we're gonna skip item number 4 to a date to be continued. Moving on to item number 5, the Homeless and Housing Committee.
Okay.
Not yet, ma'am. We're gonna get a little brief, and then I'll call you up for public comment. Sorry.
Just very, very briefly, this has been part of the ongoing discussion on these issues. Our 2 remaining members were to my knowledge, they were made aware of the meeting, but I don't see them here tonight. But the discussion we've had over and over again was the inventory of the resources that are available to those in need. And we have drafted, this is not meant to be an end-all, be-all list, but this is, I think, a starting point to accumulate these resources. And this is meant to be added to, modified over time as things change, different services are offered, different organizations come and go. And I've broadly split this up into, whether or not there's feeding involved and housing assistance, transportation assistance, and et cetera. I'm trying to list the hours that they're available for calls or appointments, and if I know anything particular about them, if they are, for seniors only, the address of the facility and the phone number that can be called. So this, and I know we have a member of the Sheriff's Department here who can also answer questions as to what the services that the HOPE team can do and how we can work together with them. At least our recommendation is to more fully understand who else is out there, and this is nonprofits, these are faith community, these are other government organizations that are suited to provide these services probably much better than our community development staff, because you're looking at almost the entire community development staff here today, and how we can coordinate and cooperate with these other entities and efficiently provide services. As an example, I looked at, when I was doing research into here, there was a discussion some time ago